I know you're ready to hop, skip, and jump out of here because we're going to talk about the flight model, but this is less a telling you about why you're wrong kind of thing and more about telling you why you're extra fucking wrong. No, this is really just about things that have been said about the flight model. Some stuff recently has come up with Yogi Klatt answering questions and responding to this thread in Spectrum. And a lot of the stuff that he's saying is actually stuff that we've heard before. So I wanted to reference this back to some of the things that the flight team has said in the past, specifically Richard Towler and John Crew, just to kind of give a little of an update on how this stuff is going to work. You've probably, if you've seen my content, know where we're going with this. Hover mode, return, right? Jerk, heat, all that kind of stuff. We'll start it off by going to CitizenCon 2023, where we got to see the first implementation of a proper stall in Star Citizen.
There's a second
just to kind of
quantum travel, and this is for short-range jumps.
Set the stage for how this is all going to work.
The stall happens when the air change.
And how what Yogi literally is saying in this thread. And by the way, it is Yogi who's talking in this.
Change here, use the rudder to your left and right. So what Brand can do here is he can roll and he can pull to actually change his direction. Okay, so just for this demo, we added a button. The button is called Thruster Disconnect, because at the moment in the PU, when you go through a planet, you're using the thrusters to rotate. We're not doing that anymore. So Brent, disconnect the thrusters, please, and put the ship into a purposeful stall. A stall happens when the airflow over a wing ceases, or over a lift surface ceases. And then at some point, you will not have any authority anymore, and your ship will not turn and so on, and you will basically fall out of the sky. That is naturally a state that every plane wants to avoid naturally, right? And this is happening right here. Brent is not able to use the control surfaces right now because the ship is in a process of stalling. However, the airflow will pull the nose back into the wind, and once you have enough speed, he can actually, well, he gets authority back over these control surfaces. That means for you as players, what you can actually do, you can do aerobraking, you can do pure gliding if you want to. You can even do like competitions like, I don't know, like drop ships out of orbit and then see how far they glide. This is all possible with a new system. So let's talk about the problem, how do you come to a stop now? To come to a stop with the new system, you need to purposefully put the ship into a stall. But don't worry, when we don't have the thrusters disconnected, IFCS will help you. So you're gonna bring down the speed more and more until you're reaching stall speed, which is about now. And then the thrusters will kick in and catch you.
So you can actually see on the MFD
until
there.
You're reaching stall speed with new system.
Let me see.
How do you come to a stop now with a new system? Like drop.
So he's using, hold on, let's go all the way back.
What you can actually do,
so you can see on the MFD that he's not using fuel right now.
Braking, you can do pure gliding if you want to. You can even do like competitions like, I don't know, like drop.
It changes a little bit though. You can see how the thrusters kind of kick in a little bit.
What you can actually do, you can do aerobraking, you can do pure gliding if you want to. You can even do like competitions.
And then again right there. So you can see that that's active.
Until you're reaching stall speed, which is about now. And then the thrusters will kick in and catch you. That means, however, you are now in a state that the thrusters don't like, right? So at the moment we have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long. So if Brent, for example, now from a hover, strafe is left, more left, more left, more left. The wind flow again pulls the ship over, and you go forward again.
So the important bit there was what he mentioned with the thrusters.
More left. So at the moment we have turned this up, but in the future you will not be able to hold this for long. So if Brent, for example, now from a hover.
So the idea that our thrusters are super powerful in this game ruins a lot of stuff. If you see a ship maneuver, it can look a little jerky. If you see it in atmosphere hovering, it looks very like segmented and not natural. If you yourself try to like slowly roll your ship, it's so just like not peaceful. Now, what you can actually do to replicate kind of what's going on here in game already is we hold right alt and scroll the mouse wheel, and it'll lower your acceleration limiter, not your speed limiter, but your acceleration limiter, which basically lowers the jerk value of your thrusters. They can't accelerate as quickly as they could before. So your rolls will be slower. It'll take longer to slow down. You even have to fight gravity a little more with your thrusters. But that's not where the flight model is going to go. Like he mentioned here, it's going to be all about whether or not you're using aerodynamics or you're using thrusters when you're in atmosphere. And aerodynamics won't be a problem for ships like a Gladius or an Eclipse or anything like that. But when you're in a ship like a Caterpillar or, I don't know, a Polaris or an Idris or something freaking huge that shouldn't just be floating in the air, you're going to have a lot more trouble just kind of sitting like that. And originally they used hover mode to try and solve that problem. But that was, as we talked about in the video, oh man, we really talked about that a lot now. That was the wrong solution for the problem that they had. And we'll watch a video in a little bit where John Crew himself says that. Like, they understand hover mode was not the right way. What hover mode did was it made it so that you were always shooting your thrust straight down, and basically you could do that for an unlimited amount of time. You would just need to hold your balance. Where I think the problem was there was that we should be able to hold our thrust in whatever direction we want, but we should have a consequence from it, right? You should be able to point your ship straight down because the maneuvering thrusters can do that. They just only do it for a certain amount of time. And hover mode basically just applied this rule that said, no thruster can do anything except for hold you facing exactly straight up, which is not how these spaceships work. So instead, they're changing it to a model where the thrusters can support you doing those things. It's just that you're going to have consequences, wear and tear, engineering problems, or full-on ship failure. That means you're going to fall out of the sky when you do that. And you can see, players literally ask about that with this kind of stuff, because why are ships still floating around like this? Big ships should not be approachable. There should be a learning curve to piloting larger ships. Physically motivated propulsion model. More dimensionality to ship lift, standard thrusters, VTOL, aerodynamic lift. This is like the kind of stuff people are looking for them to talk about. So if we look through the thread, Jesus, too many tabs. If we look through the thread that actually brought all this up in this, where we got a lot of answers from Yogi, really appreciate that. We do get a lot of answers from devs in these kinds of threads. Here's one answer he gave. Hey Yogi, any chance you could go over quickly what the current plans are for speed transitions? When John and Wrench went over them last, there were a few confusions over what the base speeds would be. Will we lose current nav speeds totally on a basic loadout ship? This isn't about the stuff I was just talking about, but we'll see what he says here. As Rich and John said in the past, there are changes coming concerning nav mode and how it relates to quantum boosting, but I don't want to talk details or speed on this yet. You'll have to wait until we have more to show, as we're still modifying things, but in general, the effort is going towards a more fluent travel system without opening the combat speeds too much. It's not what we were looking for, though. A couple of the other things that are brought up here, these will all come together soon, I promise. Hey Yogi, can we get a slower thruster ramp up for ships? Right now, thrusters deliver full thrust before they are even properly aligned, and the sudden jumps of thrust, even with light inputs, makes maneuvering both difficult and look unbelievable. It'll be great if we got an exponential thruster curve for all ships, with time to full thrust efficiency taking longer on larger ships. 100% agree. I think most people really like the sound of that. Yogi answered with the updated flight model has jerk, i.e. thrust is not immediately available and ramps up, and things should feel smoother overall. This is something that factors into what we're going to talk to, but also, like I said, if you lower your acceleration limiter, that's right alt and scroll wheel, you can already experience kind of what that feels like. Another question that was on here, just to clarify this, do you mean this is pretty much hover mode, or are you saying turning off IFCS will point thrusters down and actually give us that helicopter style flight we had? Let's see, where did he... So there's like a whole thread for this because it looks like that's a second answer. Wow, there's a lot of replies and I can't even open them all. Okay, well, we'll listen to what his reply was and then we'll continue from there. So one of the things he says here is the floaty big ships won't get resolved until we roll out updates to the flight model, which will include control surfaces tech for atmospheric flight. We're going to get on that. The general ability of ships to float is simply driven from their ability to counter gravity. It's a bit of a between a rock and a hard place situation. We don't want to hamstring the ships so that we can't take off, but at the same time, we also dislike ships hovering with their nose down indefinitely. See, I don't think it's I really think that it's fairly, they've laid it out. You got stronger thrusters on the bottom of your ship, right? Every other maneuvering thruster gets nerfed so that we can't make super ridiculous maneuvers and we can't float in any direction but straight down. And then for the ships that have VTOL thrusters, they can do it longer because even though those bottom thrusters are stronger, they still are overheating over time. So he said there's two ways to handle this. Balance the thruster efficiencies in a way so that standard Earth Atmo, the ships only provide enough thrust if their VTOLs are deployed, or add some fakey flight model stuff that autocorrects the ship altitude or even limits it. Literally, this was hover mode. Hover mode auto-corrected the ship, or at least tried to, based on what the direction of gravity pointed, which was down. This is the new version, balancing the thruster efficiencies so that they only can counteract gravity based on what actual thrusters they are. I like the first way more. At the moment, we're naturally looking more towards approach 1, but it has some difficulties that we need to deal with properly. Thrust in general would be very limited, and in default 1 gravity environments, only vertically or forward thrust would provide enough G's to stay afloat. Yes, 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 yes. However, that also means that retro or lateral thrust would need to be so weak that at the same time it would be very easy to crash land your ship, which naturally conflicts with the idea of an approachable game, as you can imagine. That's too f***ing bad! As somebody who constantly crashes into the ground, I don't care. And that's not about me, so, you know, that's just my opinion. But we need trade-offs, man. I want an approachable game too, but we really gotta have some trade-offs with this stuff. I hope that they stick to that. I hope they stick to it. If we go for that approach, he says, we need to add a few more things. Automated controls that kind of keep your ship from dipping over, maybe even an altitude hold, autopilot mode, specifically during landing. That's sort of like what hover mode did. A reliable indication of your thrust to weight ratio against gravity that takes cargo weight into account so that you don't have to try and take off or land overloaded. That's also very useful. These are great UI things we're going to need. And some more help during landing so that players can easily, without going nose down. Right. A 3D landing UI, I think, like we used to have, would be great. Now that's just me saying what's on my mind at the moment. We're currently busy with the flight model updates. Space flight model is done, control surfaces tech, and new quantum is not yet. And we'll get to these topics of Atmos ship hovering fairly soon. It does not mean that what I described above will ultimately end up in the game, though. I really hope it is. I really hope that's in the game. That... I can see from his response here that the whole... I was really obsessed with this whole thing of like, hey, we're making certain ships that work better in atmosphere and certain ships that don't, and therefore you will need to pick the ship that would work for you, you know? And like, I want them to be just have the balls to be like, if you struggle flying in atmosphere, then just get a hull C and stay in space and make your money. I really want them to feel comfortable limiting us to the gameplay that's most comfortable for us, rather than just making sure that everything is equally accessible. So I hope they stick to that, to this first model, and they can pull through with what they're trying to do, and it can have reasonable trade-offs for flying in and outside of atmosphere. Now, what the other person asked about this was a little follow-up question. Let me see if I can find it now. I did see one here, though. Yogi said, Waffle Insanity said, hover mode never had the time to cook. It could have been a better system after all these years. We really need an Atmo mode and a space mode rather than a fast and slow mode. And Yogi said, with the updated flight model, you can turn off what is called the IFCS core. It cuts away all assists in gravity environments that pretty much gets you what hover mode was, just a bit harder. See, what my problem with hover mode was that it, like, when I tipped over, it didn't disable IFCS. It would still kick in. If you're not great at flying in Atmo, grab a GATAC and use the main thrust to get yourself straight into space. Yeah, or any other ship that has downward-facing VTOL thrusters. That's what I want to see from CIG. Hey, you guys, it's harder to fly in atmosphere, but check out these ships. There's a whole selection of ships at every class and level, and if you get those, you have no problems. Then you'd find people who actually like atmosphere, and you'd see them flying a raft, and you're like, hey, dude, you do a lot of planetary deliveries? Is that why you're flying that? All right, I need to find that other response, though, because I liked where it was going. Waffle Insanity, what do you mean the vastly improved inventory kiosk, man? Don't give me a blood clot. Okay, let me try and find that thread again. This person said, I think we're all well aware that the game doesn't do everything perfectly yet. Yogi. Okay, here it was. Just to clarify this, do you mean this is pretty much hover mode, or are you saying turning off IFCS will point thrusters down and actually give us that helicopter-style flight we had? Yogi said, without the core gravity compensation is gone, and so is IFCS ability to command a goal velocity, be it for linear movement or rotation, meaning you have to brake yourself if you want to come to a stop. This is basically uncoupled, decoupled mode in all directions whatsoever, rotation included. For hovering, you need to constantly apply as much acceleration as is needed to stay in hover, and control your rotation manually so that you don't slide. If you're just a little offset and roll, accelerating upwards will cause a drift, so that's really only for very advanced users, I mean pilots. See, I feel like that's what hover mode did before. Even if there wasn't like you're hovering and also balancing, you were just balancing, so if you got off balance, you couldn't cancel the hover, so the ship would continue to push you in that direction. I don't know if they fixed that or not, I just remember that being a very annoying part of it. This sounds good though, if all of it is turned off, and you get the ability to basically figure everything out yourself, that'll look pretty cool when somebody can master that. Follow-up question was, does utilizing this IFCS mode then produce a benefit as in no longer hovering time without burning out thrusters, or is it simply viewed as challenge mode? He said that's a bit too complex to be useful. You'll not be able to use a per thruster output limit, as that would make the ship just unstable to the point of being unusable. That's like decoupling the front wheels of a car, but the acceleration limiter still exists, so you can scale the whole thrust output down if you want. And that's what I was talking about earlier, acceleration limiter. Last bit of this, the last part of this is an Invictus Week Star Citizen Live with John Crew and Richard Taller. This is where they first laid out this whole system. Now you get to hear it from the mouths.
Let's see. Regarding flight physics on planets, things like VTOL mode sort of lose meaning when you can just hover upside down or nose pointing at the ground. Why does it make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector? While it does make flying easy, especially for things like the Prospector, it does break immersion. Are there any plans to force ships to stay close to horizontal at slow speeds? This would also affect ground combat and make it more necessary, as you wouldn't just be able to point straight down at targets.
Just that one is yes. So it's playing with explaining. So at the moment we have aero surfaces on these ships, but it doesn't fly like a plane. So they're still driven by the thrusters, but we do change them based on the planet they're on. So they do lose some power in atmosphere, but the thrusters to generate the performance in space have to be set in strengths. To generate the accelerations that we require in space. And then we fly in atmosphere, you lose some efficiency, but we still need the strength of the thrusters to be able to push the ship through the air. And actually pushing aero surfaces through the air takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. So we are limited in terms of, to get the maneuverability in atmosphere currently, we still need quite strong, we still need quite strong thrusters, which means you can hover quite easily. But that's not always going to be the case. So in the future, we are going to move towards control surfaces. And this is going to allow us to move the movement of the ship from thrusters to aerodynamics. So it's going to be the aerodynamics driving the maneuverability of the ship in atmosphere. And then the thrusters are just going to help a little bit. They're going to help just move the ship and allow the thruster layouts to kind of do their work, but it's not going to be the primary source. So if you're flying a Gladius, for example, and you go really slow, it's just not going to have the power to kind of keep it up. And that's where the VTOL ship's going to come in, where they can transform and fly in VTOL and hover, and that's where they'll have the advantage. But we need to add control surfaces first and work out how we do all the controls with that as well, because it's quite a complex problem to solve. Without going like full flight simulator, for example.
Right. Didn't we do some version of this before? With adding the
old hover mode?
Yeah. Right.
To an extent, yes, but that sort of tried to solve the problem in a different way, and some people liked it, a lot of people didn't like it, and it was the right idea with not quite the right implementation. Another thing we can look at when all the stuff Rich talked about is heat. We don't really use heat at the moment because the way heat works in our game is not how we want it to work long term, and this is something with the resource system that is being entirely redone. But for ships that, like a Gladius, as well as needing that control surface to keep up in the air, like if you're not going fast, those thrusters can start overheating as an extra penalty, because in reality you could just upend your Gladius like that and balance it on its main thrusters, but because they're powerful enough to do that, so they should be powerful enough to do that, but they're going to be working so hard that heat is going to build up, and we can cause intentional problems doing it that way to stop. I've seen people landing their Scorpiuses on the wings that way, and that sort of stuff will start being a lot more rare.
Like a Gunstar in Last Starfighter.
Yeah.
So it's not a new thing per se. It's something that they've wanted to do, just like so many other things in Star Citizen. And I think we're getting close to a point where this is going to become testable by us. There's already people finding signs of this IFCS core mode being disabled in the game files, and Yogi's talking about it here. I think it's something that we'll be seeing probably in the EPTU sometime soon. So that's really most of what we know about where the flight model is going, at least as far as this whole atmospheric flight hover mode stuff. We've already made other videos talking about how master modes is going away, and that functionality will be moved into the operator modes, but maybe we'll touch on that again sometime soon, just to give a little refresher. But yeah, this was your hover mode, your heat, your control surfaces, your atmospheric flight, and what we know about it. Thanks, Yogi.